Interview was rather more low-key. It was conducted by one of Sports Illustrated's legal analysts, Michael McCann, who spoke earlier with Don. So I wonder, how did the interview even come about?
Lance Armstrong added me as a follower on Twitter, and from there we began a conversation. I mentioned that I'd written about him, and we started discussing the possibility of meeting up, and we ultimately agreed to meet up down in Austin and eventually at his house. And it was certainly an eye-opening experience and one that I won't forget.
Why do you think he was interested in you?
I think he views me as relatively fair or neutral. As a legal analyst, my job is to focus on both sides of an argument to ensure that both sides are getting a fair shake. And I believe that was one of his motivations, is that I'm able to, and really as part of my job, is to look at issues as objectively as possible.
Is he concerned about the public's perception of him, do you think? Did he go there at all?
I think he's concerned about public perception, but I really think his primary focus right now, Don, is on these lawsuits and how he's going to defend against them, some of the legal arguments that he has and that his lawyers have put together, focused on arguing that many of these claims are from a long time ago. So there's the question of whether the claims are barred by the statute of limitations. And then there's the question of damages. For instance, in the whistleblower case that the Department of Justice has brought, it is expected that Armstrong's lawyers will argue that even if he committed fraud, and they're not conceding that, but even if he did, they're going to argue that, well, what damages were there? There are studies by the U.S. Postal Service team that apparently said something to the effect of they earned 3 times more than what they put in. So he's focused really right now on these legal arguments, some of the deficiencies of the claims against him.
And do you get the sense that he personally has a really strong grasp on the legal arguments himself here?
Yeah, I do. And he's a smart guy. People can say what they want about him, and certainly some of the comments that he's made in the past in terms of their accuracy or truthfulness can be brought into question. But he is someone who I think has thought through these issues. And let's face it, he's faced with over $100 million in damages if he loses these cases. I think anyone in his position would be really focused on defending against them and realizing where are his strengths and weaknesses in these cases.
In the Oprah Winfrey interview, he seemed rather robotic at times. He didn't seem particularly contrite or apologetic for what has gone on in the past. Was he any different with you?
I thought he was much more lively. I thought he was much more personable. He definitely seemed like a human being. And I never got that sense that, and I know what you're talking about in the Oprah interview, he did seem more robotic or, less human, if you will. In our conversation, it was a conversation. He viewed it as he was talking to another person. And obviously the fact that there weren't cameras, there was no recording of it, I think that lends itself to a more earnest or candid talk about what's going on. Now, people will criticize him as to what he said, and that's fair game. But in terms of his emotions and what he showed, he certainly was human.
Did you have a particular view of him before the interview? And if so, has that opinion changed now?
I think my view of him is that he's a very intense, focused guy. And that's true coming out of this. He is very focused. He is intense. That's probably what propelled him to winning 7 Tour de France's, that you have to be zoned in on what you're doing. And nothing he said or did in our interview suggested otherwise. This is somebody who's faced with extraordinary liability, more so than most Americans put together could ever face. And he is definitely zoned in on defending against that. It's that same drive, I suspect, that helped him as a cyclist, and he's going to need it now, no question about it.
Well, cast your minds back now to this year's Australian Tennis Open in Melbourne. Just reflect for a second or two on that breakout performance from the young American, the 19-year-old Sloane Stephens.